I am delighted that you are here. So before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors for this session, Sendero Health Plans. We are grateful for their support in helping to make this event possible. Thank you again, Sendero Health Plans. Now, we have a few housekeeping items to go over. This is a safe, supportive space. Please help us to maintain a respectful and inclusive environment. Please mute yourself at all times. Remember that we are live on Facebook. Please use the chat function in Hoover to interact with other attendees. For questions for the presenter, we ask that you please use the Q&A section in Hoover. And if you feel overwhelmed or need to talk during this session, you need to talk to someone, please feel free to call 512-472-4357. I'm going to repeat it again, 512-472-4357. And that's again, if you feel you need to talk with someone. So you're going to press 1, then 1 again for immediate emotional support. Someone is waiting to receive your call. So between sessions, you can visit our comfort suite where we provide a safe haven. Doesn't that sound just wonderful? A comfort suite is prepared and designed just for you. You'll find the comfort suite in community under the main navigation in Hoover. At the end of the session, there will be a link to the workshop evaluation in the chat. This is really key and critical for your CEUs. At the end of the session, there will be a link to the workshop evaluation in the chat. I also need to let you know that we have some great conference merchandise. So be sure to check out our online store at ctaafsc.com/shop. I mean, so many of us are shopping online. So this conference, we got some things for you I'm sure you would love to have. So everyone, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our presenters, Kimberly Holliday and Dr. Ulysses Moore. Kimberly Holliday, known to most as Lady Joy, is the on-air radio personality at KAZI 88.7 FM. She is a social psychologist, motivational speaker, book author, and restorative justice practitioner. You will find her joy constantly contagious, and I know that's right. A reflection for others to know that they too can live with potential for more joy, regardless of life circumstances. And Dr. Ulysses Moore is the founder and director of the Hope Project, an organization that provides tools for individuals and families to live and thrive in their communities. Dr. Moore is also in private practice, providing services such as community living support, mentoring, and counseling. He's been in the helping profession for over 18 years. You can learn more about Kimberly and Dr. Moore by reading their bios in Hoover. Now, let's enjoy Kimberly and Dr. Moore.
Woo! Thank you so very much, Jacqueline. What an honor it is to be here. If I could ask everyone, if you're not speaking, to make sure that you mute so that there is no background noise. I just want to give space to the fact that we are joining in a virtual space and how interesting and new that is. I'm going to do my very best to stick with my notes here to make sure that we stay on schedule. I just want to give space. Dr. Moore, if I could have you mute for just a moment. I just want to give space to the fact that we are actually meeting in a virtual space. And typically when I do these workshops, I like to kick off my shoes, everyone knows that, and run around the room with a microphone. And so what we're going to do today, it is my hope that we can create the best possible space we can in this virtual space. I want you to know that unlike any other workshop you've been in, this is going to be an interactive experience. And so normally when we're gathered together in a healing, restorative justice circle, I will pass a talking piece. Since we're in a virtual space, you raising your hand is going to be the virtual talking piece. And I don't want you to wait until the end for questions and answers. Again, this is going to be interactive. I find that there is liberation in using your voice. Let me stick to my notes. As I minister to you, I am really ministering to myself. I have opted to do this session live, to show up real and authentic. And so first off, I want to thank Integral Care and the Central Texas African American Family Support Planning Conference for the opportunity once again to allow myself, Kimberly Holiday, and Dr. Moore to speak here. So good morning to you, Dr. Ulysses Moore.
Okay, you got me mute. Good morning, Kimberly. How you doing? Jacqueline, thank you for a beautiful introduction. Really appreciate that. Looking forward to speaking and meeting and getting to know most of you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. There was some background noise, and so that's why I asked that we mute in while we're not speaking. But I thank you so much for being here, Dr. Moore. If you guys don't know, he is my professor. He is my professional mentor. He is a super supporter. And I'm just so honored that you are here today, Dr. Moore, because you always just make me look good. So we're going to jump right into our presentation today. I also want to take this opportunity to thank each of you for being here, for being intentional, and for pushing your way to show up on today. Now, today's topic is not one that is fun and joyful, and I've had to make peace with that, but this is a conversation that is necessary. Thank you to Jacqueline, thank you for Justin, and thank you to Ellen, who are propping me up on the right and the left to make sure that this goes forth without a hitch. So Justin, if I could go ahead and have you start with our slides. We're gonna go there. Maybe you can focus on the slides and not on me. So again, thank each of you for being here. Don't forget to raise your virtual hand at any time if you want to join in. Again, thank you for joining our workshop today for the second day at the conference. This is Living Loss, Coping with Grief During COVID, presented to you by Dr. Ulysses L. Moore and Kimberly Holiday. By trade, I'm a social psychologist. I'm showing up in the world as a motivational speaker, restorative justice practitioner, radio host personality, but again, as Jacqueline said, on all platforms to simply model the potential to live with more joy despite life circumstances. And right now, this couldn't be more timely for me as I am experiencing grief in my life. Next slide. I think I've already done my best to welcome you. And so this is the point. We can go to the next slide. This is actually where I like to just create sanctuary. We're talking about living loss today, and living loss is simply grief without death. And because of COVID, I believe that most of us are experiencing this. Before we get deeply into our slides, I want to let you know that if we were sitting together physically in a circle, I would create something we call sanctuary. And I'm really doing this for myself and for you. And the purpose of this is to create a safe space for you to be able to just show up as yourself, okay? Again, I said I normally like to kick off my shoes, so I invite each of you to make yourself comfortable. And at this time, to simply just focus on your breathing. Amen. Again, we're stretching ourselves with technology, so just give yourself some grace and self-appreciation for being able to show up here today. I want you to know that you are entering a space of no judgment. In this space, self-love is encouraged. Again, this is an interactive experience, and I want you and I encourage you to lift your voices. And our moderators and Melanie Diggs and others in the background are watching the chat box as well. Again, I want you to know that there is liberty and freedom in using your voice. There is also power in the past. Amen. So if we were in a room together, if the talking piece was passed to you, there is power in the past. Even though this session is being recorded, I want you to know as much as possible, we'd like to have this Vegas style. What it says here stays here. And just be mindful that this will be shared later on Access TV in order that it may help someone. And so I encourage you also to be vulnerable in this space. And for me, I want to remind myself and others that there is no place for perfection here, and that all you are required to do is simply show up as yourself. Okay, so today we're talking about living loss, coping with grief during COVID. So what is living loss? All right. So it was a term that came to me recently, and it really resonated with me. Living loss is simply grief without death. All right. And so, again, this is not an easy topic for me, but it's a necessary topic, and we definitely need to talk about it. So I heard this term recently, and again, it resonated with me because during COVID-19, we are missing out on a lot of things. And I have found myself in times of just deep sorrow, right? Periods of just sobbing, doing my very best to make acceptance with the things that are going on. Next slide. So today we're going to be talking about living loss and grief, right? And so there's many different types of loss. And so I just want to make room for our current circumstances at this time, and to acknowledge that there are different types of losses. And I've tried to put them in boxes. I bet there are many more, but the first ones that come to mind for me is physical, occupational, spiritual loss, and social loss. And again, this term living loss was birthed as a revelation that people are carrying grief due to a range of life experiences. And many times, people are experiencing grief when actually no one has actually passed away. And so during this time, I want to encourage you to put in the chat box different types of losses that you personally are experiencing or that you know of others are experiencing. While preparing for this particular workshop, I started just making a list for myself. And then I started asking some of my friends too. So if you'll go ahead and put in the chat box and then get ready to raise your hands if you feel so led to talk about it. I'm just going to start going through my list at this time. Again, thank you all for making room for this to be virtual. This is new for me. I'm in my own box and it's a little bit interesting. So, grief and loss of a loved one. Go ahead and put your stuff in the chat box. Some people are experiencing a loss of memory, loss of a job due to COVID. I know my husband lost his job after 23 years of being employed in March at the onset of COVID-19. Loss of socializing. I sure miss my friends. I also miss my church fellowships, and though I used to take it for granted, I sure miss the 3:30 services, the pastor anniversaries, and all. If I miss Wednesday night Bible study, we actually ate at my church every Wednesday at 6 o'clock. I sure miss that. I miss dine-in dinners. I miss seeing your face as you hide behind that mask. I miss seeing your smile. I miss traveling. Actually, I do go where I want, but it is with some restrictions. I miss open travel. I miss family gatherings for holidays. Christmas, Thanksgiving just hasn't been the same. And because we've been in this for almost about a year, I imagine that many of you have celebrated birthdays during times of COVID. There have actually been some loss of friendships that didn't survive the first couple of months of COVID. That's a whole nother workshop. There's been loss of finances, which causes a loss of social status for some people. I am a host, and so I miss hosting live music venues and seeing people, concerts with my boothing. The loss of my freedom, loss of security as I watch things happen on the news on January the 6th. I miss reading your lips because I can't see it behind your mask. My list goes on. I hope you're putting your things in the chat. Since I serve on board meetings, I actually miss seeing your face in team and board meetings, even though I hardly could stand them. I miss it. I miss seeing my doctors in person. I am a warrior of sickle cell, and so I have to see many doctors. So I miss seeing them and having human interaction. I miss seeing children on the playground playing as I walk around the streets. I miss my kids leaving this house to go to school. I miss that. I also miss giving my family members and my friends and my loved ones a proper farewell as they transition from this life. I asked some of my friends how they felt about this as well. They said that they miss crowds. Next slide. So I'm going to actually ask Dr. Moore to turn on his mic at this time while our moderators check and see what we have in the chat section for what you are missing, what you are experiencing a loss of. At this time, we'd like to talk about what is grief. Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Let me get set up here. Let's see. My camera's not working. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. Justin, could you turn my camera on if you don't mind?
I don't think that I have the ability to do that. Again, thank you all for making room for us to learn these things with technology. I think you have the power to turn your camera on, but if not, we can still hear you just fine.
Okay, so let's get started. Let's talk about what is grief. Hopefully you guys are putting that in the chat box, what you think grief is. What is grief to you? It does. First of all, we're going to talk about grief being, that is so small. I can't even see it on the camera. Excuse me. Let me pull it up. So, grief is not discriminate. Mm-hmm. It does not discriminate at all. It doesn't matter. Grief comes in many forms, as we just covered. Grief doesn't discriminate against anyone. Okay, some people are grieving different things. Grief is not linear. It doesn't go from anger to all the way to acceptance. It doesn't work like that. You experience grief in many different forms and fashions. Everybody doesn't grieve the same. Some people are at acceptance in a couple of months. Some people don't reach acceptance for a couple of years. You know, it all depends on where you're at in your grief process. Don't let anybody tell you that you're grieving too long, you haven't grieved enough, what's going on. The grief is an individual, a personal process, a personal journey, okay? And grief is normal and a natural. It is a natural process going through the human experience. Understand that, please. It is. It's a natural process. We all will go through grief at some time during our stay on this planet. Itself, grief is neither a pathological condition nor a personality disorder. Understand, like we said prior, grief is it's a natural process. We all will go through grief at some point, during our existence. We will go through grief. We will cause grief. We will cause grief as we go through this existence. Make it a typical part of your being and where you're going through, and realize and understand, yeah, you're going to still go through the process of grief, but understand it and be willing to accept the things that you're going through, and know that you will get through it. You will always get through it. We always do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moore. I have a question for you since we're making this interactive experience. Is grief a mental crisis?
Well, it can be. It can be, because it can lead you into a depressed state where you just don't feel like doing anything. You don't feel like being interactive. When do you know that it's becoming a crisis? You're not eating. You're not sleeping. You're not interacting. You can't get out of bed. These are crisis symptoms, crisis signs. When these start happening, please reach out and get help. If not from your loved ones, your circle, reach out to your churches, your minister, just reach out and get some help.
It's awesome. Thank you. I just want to say that it's really important while we're talking about living grief and, living loss, that we make room and honor our current circumstances. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but there are so many different things going on in our lives on top of the grief. And so, someone asked me that question the other day, Dr. Moore, is it a mental health crisis? And my answer to that is it doesn't have to be, but it can be when the grief becomes complicated and it is unresolved and your grief is not moving. We're going to go to the next slide, but I also see my moderator who has opened up her line to speak.
Yes, thank you. This question is right along the lines of our current discussion. COVID has left families not being able to come together to grieve. How do we cope?
Woo! I should let the professionals dig in on that. Again, as I stand before you today to give this talk on grief, it's only because these are the very same things that I'm experiencing. I'm just now, as we're live today, coming to acceptance that the fact that I'm missing that we can't be in the rooms to actually hug each other. I celebrated my birthday in a way that was non-traditional. I miss my family. My mom won't come to my house. And when my mother comes to my house, she wears a mask. And I feel that mask is like a whole brick wall that's standing between us, because I just want to reach out and hug her. I'm an only child. And so I'm going to let Dr. Moore talk to you about ways, but really these issues are we have to figure out for ourselves what's best for us. I'm still working through these things. My mom and I have figured out different ways to connect through social media. I've taught her how to get on Zoom so I can see her face, and then by doing that, she's like, hey, can you hook up a New Year family party at midnight? I'm like, I don't want to be on Zoom at midnight. But because it's new to her, and I told her no at first, but then I thought about it for a moment and I was like, this is all we've got. And
so Kimberly.
Yes.
I'm so sorry for interrupting you. My apologies. I wanted to get a second question came in, which is still right along the lines of this conversation, and maybe perhaps Dr. Moore can include it in his response as well. So I know that it is hard to cope with the loss of a loved one because I myself took years to learn about how to cope with the loss of my father. How does one provide the space to the grieving while making sure you are still providing as much support as possible? And how can we do this not just with an adult, but with a teenager as well?
Kim, I'll go ahead and start with that one. Great question. And answering that question, we do as we do all the time. We should be practicing as adults. We listen to hear. A lot of times, you know, we go through life, we're listening to people, we're listening to respond to whatever they're talking about. But the grieving process requires that we listen to hear the person. If they want space, we give them space. If they don't want space, we all come in for the group hug. You know, that's what we do as people. That's what we should be doing as people. It's so important that, especially during this time of grief, when they're going through things, we listen to hear what they're saying, how they're feeling. We're just listening to hear. That's what they need.
Thank you for that. Again, I want to make room for anyone we're passing the talking piece for you to raise your hand to come in at any time with comments and questions. If you can imagine me in the room with my high heel shoes kicked off, running around the room with a microphone to put it in your face so you can say how you feel. The particular next slide that we have up right now is because I like to say in other words, many times we filter our, our emotions through our experiences and different things. And so there are different words that have different meanings. So your friend may tell you that they are in anguish. They may tell you that they're experiencing pain, that they're in distress, that there is sorrow, that there is agony, and there is misery. So there are different names and feelings associated in words with grief. And the reason I always like to do this is because, you know, as we have these community dialogues, all of us may not use the same word. And it's so important that as we work through our stuff, and especially because we're alone and we're called to now, we have to speak out and let others know how we feel. Sometimes there are other words, right? So someone may not be able to tell you I'm grieving right now. They may either show you in what they're doing or tell you that they are experiencing grief through some of these other words. Again, in the chat box, if you have any other words that you've heard or that are used, I'd love to have those as well. And Dr. Moore, whenever you want to jump in, please do. All right. The reason I wanted to give space to honoring your current circumstances is because your current circumstances create stress. Hello. Am I knocking on your door? Traffic, technology, coworkers, your bosses, illness, caregiving for those who are sick, caregiving for our kids. Parents are now teachers. My spouse, my partner. I'm not going to say too much. Politics, bills, deadlines, expectations for myself and for others, people just being rude, people just being judgmental, bad drivers, cell phones getting on my nerves. Everybody think they can just reach out to me whenever they want, and I'm supposed to have an instant response to them. All right. Amen. We still have financial expenses. There's death still happening. Next slide. So just give room and space for your circumstances. Now we're going to talk about the stages of grief. And before Dr. Moore jumps into that, I just want to simply say that as people, we like to put things in simple steps. Grief doesn't work in a simple step process. Right? And so while you think this may be a straight line that you're going to go through, it actually may be like this. But you got to keep moving. So Dr. Moore, I'm going to turn it over to you at this time to talk to us about the stages of grief.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. We're going to go through the stages of grief. Mind you, there's been a new one added, so we'll talk about that one as well. This is because we're going through them in a chronological order. Doesn't mean, just be mindful. That's not how it happens. Some people will hit the anger before they hit the shock and denial. But let's start with shock and denial. And what is that? When we talk about shock and denial, you're going through a process where you're saying, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. You're denying the reality. And you're taking it to almost a fantasy that it's not happening, right? That's what you go through during the shock and denial. And then, of course, next step, they talk about anger. You know, you're going to get angry. Why are you getting angry? Because you're coming to the reality that it is what it is. It happened. Here we are. Then you go into the bargaining. And bargaining more or less is for, you know, if you are terminally ill and you're trying to bargain a little bit. Okay. If you will heal me, I promise you I'll get out. I'll go to church every day. You know, I'll attend the meetings in the evening. I'll do all this stuff. You're bargaining. Or if you have a child that's sick and God, heal my child. Heal my child. I promise you I'll be a better parent. I won't talk about them getting on my nerves anymore, bothering me. You know, I won't threaten to kick them out the house. I'll do all this stuff. That's bargaining. And that's a part of the process as well, you know. And then the next stage we want to talk about is grief, is depression. It's the actual depression. And this is where it gets kind of tricky because you've got to be able to realize when you're in the grieving process, you want to be able to delineate if you're going through a real depression or is it a part of the grief? How do you know? How do you know? We talked about some of the signs, you know, of depression. You feel hopeless, which you're going to feel some of that too, you know, while you're going through this process. You're going to feel hopeless. You're going to feel like there's no fix. I can't fix this. No one can fix this. Okay. But the other things we talked about earlier, we talked about not being able to get out of bed, a change in diet, a change in your sleeping habit, a change in doing the things that you really like to do. And responding back to the person asked that, you know, when you're going through this process, how do you help someone else? You know, and you're looking for these signs. And if you don't know the signs of depression, I highly recommend that you look them up. So that way you can delineate between, is this person are they in the grieving depression stage or are they really in depression? You know, and you can talk to them and there's questions that you can ask them to help them along and move them along. You know, somebody may be sinking into depression. There's questions that you can ask, you know, about, hey, how are you sleeping? Are you eating? You know, when's the last time, I know you love to play basketball. When's the last time you went out and hooped? You know, you're asking these questions because you want to know how deep they are in depression. Okay, and moving right along, the last one on the chart is the acceptance and hope. You're coming to terms with what happened. You know, you're coming in a term, you're accepting what happened. This is my new normal. This is my new normal. This is what I have to deal with. What do you do? What do you do after that? And that's where Mr. Kessler came up and said, you know what? We kind of left them hanging. So they accepted it. Now, what do they do? So he actually sat down and came up with a sixth stage, which is finding meaning. And it's a very important piece because if you stop at the acceptance, what have you stopped at? You stopped at now there's nobody to feel those. And you've got to find people in your circle to kind of, you know, stand in those positions that person held. Or it's going to be hard to shake the grieving stages. If that makes sense, it's going to be hard because you haven't completed the entire process. You've got to find, if that person was your emotional support, now you got to go find us some emotional support. If that person was somebody you go to when you needed a couple of dollars, now you got to find somebody that you can go to when you need a couple of dollars. So please remember that sixth step. Please remember that sixth step, finding meaning. Very important, very important.
Finding meaning. Mm-hmm. That was wonderful. Next slide. Oh, wow. So, you know, as Dr. Moore talked about the stages of grief and that it doesn't move in a linear fashion. If you look at the slide that's there, I mean, the roadmap that you expect is not actually the roadmap that you are going to get. And so, Dr. Moore, if you'll mute again, we have a little back feed. That's okay. We're using our phones and our computers today to make this work. So the stages of grief look like this. And so you may feel like you're not moving forward. It doesn't look like you're moving forward, but you actually are. So again, this is an opportunity to grant yourself some appreciation and space to grow and just to make room for your grief. You know, as I saw this particular slide, it brought tears to my eyes because sometimes it doesn't look like we're moving, but really we're spending a lot of time actually just resisting the feeling of sadness, and our emotions are put in place for a reason. And so if you feel deep loss and sorrow, it's because you're missing something and someone, and that's okay. And so give yourself permission to feel sad and for that to manifest and articulate itself in whatever way that may be for you. My face leaks, and as I cry, I make room for more joy, because sadness can just fill me up and make me feel overwhelmed. And when you talked about the bargaining stage, Dr. Moore, I thought about how I can get stuck there and feeling overwhelmed and feeling depressed. And for me, the way that shows up in my life is being the queen of procrastination. Oh, I'm just going to give myself some time for strategic thinking, right? That's what you might be telling yourself. However, there's this fine line, right, between giving yourself some time to think and going over to the other side where you're just not moving at all. Jacqueline or any of our chat champions, if you have anything to add, please do at this time. Any hands raised? I can't see them.
I don't see hands raised, but I will go ahead and share some of these comments that's in the chat box in Hoover, and they're really awesome. So Jacqueline says, Smith Francis says, I think as people of color, we avoid a lot. And sometimes it manifests with addictive behaviors, shopping, under eating, sexual activity as numbing, smoking, drinking, etc. And I don't say these things in a condemning way, but as a part of an honest conversation about things me and my family and friends have struggled with. And then she also says, my practicing yoga, healing and nurturing space for meditation, gentle yoga and slowing down. Then Madeline Diggs says, walking is great. And Rose says, grief comes out in procrastination. Yeah. And there are lots of comments about walking and being outside. And let's see, here's another one. Okay, Jacqueline comes back and says, I like, I watch Netflix and use that as a self-care moment as well.
That's good. Thank you. Y'all keep those chats coming. It looks like Justin's hand is raised. And before we go to Justin, I want to say this. Thank you, Jacqueline, for knocking on my door. And for those who don't want to be honest about it, when we are grieving, we use people, places, and things. And it is so important, as Dr. Moore said in this new 6th thing, finding meaning, that you not find your hope or seek your hope, because you won't find it in the bottle. You won't find it in your drug of choice. And let me talk about those who use food as their drug of choice. There are some drugs that are legal, food. And so, you can't tell all the weight that I've gained sitting here because you can only see my face. So thank you for Jacqueline for bringing up the fact that we need to get real about those vices we are using instead of moving, actually shifting into step number 6, which is finding healthy meaning in our new way of living. Justin, go ahead.
Hey, Kimberly, I was just doing some testing. So I don't have a question. Making sure the hand raiser is working, but I do see that Rose Brown does have a question.
Thank you so much, Justin. So yeah, like I told you all, we're doing this a little different. I encourage you to speak. Imagine yourself sitting in a kumbaya circle, and we're ready to talk. Rose Brown, thank you for being here today. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with everything. I'm one of the seasoned citizens, and me and my cousin talk about this for a while. I was an early widower, like at 28, and then again at 42. I had no clue about grieving. You just suck it up and you keep going. And especially in our communities, Black communities, we don't really do the grief thing, because either we say God has it and then we just move on, but it's God is the answer. But being able to put in place, acknowledging that we're going through grief, knowing what that is, and then finding that meaningful thing. What has been meaningful for me is doing service. It was brought to my attention back in July when I was doing a lot of procrastination and sleeping a lot or whatever, that I was going through hug and connection withdrawal. I wasn't able to really get out. So I started sending greeting cards to everybody for any reason. I had to find some way of getting up out of myself and getting that feel good that I was looking for. I was staying good and staying in connection with God and everything. But at the same time, it's me, God, and other people. So I was losing some of that, and I didn't realize that. So being able to reach out and hear that. And then one other thing with Kay Hutchinson, I've done some work with her, and I didn't realize our organs, our bodies hold that grief, and we have to move. We have to move as well as mentally. So thanks for sharing. I totally agree, and I like that 6th step.
That's good, right? Justin, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you so much, Miss Rose. And Jacqueline, I see you back.
Yeah.
More questions?
Lena in the chat says dancing helps. And I thought you would really like to hear that one, because I know we love to dance.
Y'all know I like to rock these hips. Hello. I'm the gospel radio announcer, but it's a lot of things that go down in the background, right? And so we are going to be talking about self-care, real self-care, what that looks like, during COVID. So I thank you all for bringing those things up. Again, keep your hands raised if you want to say something. This is the space for that. So I also wanted to talk about some of the things that are also coupled with my grief. All these things that are in the background that were already going on top of. This week, we will be burying a 4-year-old who died by drowning. And so, I'm going to have to make room for that. But then as I was walking my 3 miles yesterday, I realized I got all these other issues going on as well. I'm just going to talk about myself. So if you look at some of these pictures, Dr. Moore talked about depression. Jacqueline, did you have something before we go further?
I can get the question once you're done with this, because I think it's going to relate to what you're going into.
Perfect. Y'all see me running around the room with my microphone? I'm ready. So I already deal with depression. It's already in my stuff, right? The PTSD. I am a survivor of childhood sexual trauma. As I do the work in the field, many of you don't know, I also work for the Hope Project with Dr. Moore, servicing and, teaching life skills to youth. And so out there in the field, I also experience things that are triggers for me from my own trauma, right? And so I have to be aware of these things. I'm probably not teaching you anything new, but I'm asking us to be mindful and to be aware of the issues that are already there, so that when I take care of a client and something comes up for me, I know what to do to go take care of myself. And I want you to know that it's okay for the professional to go seek professional help, right? The reason that we're out, Dr. Moore, if you need to unmute yourself, I see you going to church on me. Listen, if you need to get...
I love it. That's a great point, man. and when you were talking about, we know what's going on inside, but we just need to name it. And once you name it, you can deal with it.
Yes, that's why I told y'all to raise your hands.
And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and present the question now. Where is the fine line between self-care and using a drug of choice? And this person said, for me, I'm addicted to Netflix and food.
All right, Dr. Moore, you take it off. But listen, self-care, there is a fine line because you can do too much of anything. Safely, I'm going to use food. Food is something that we must have, right? But I can do too much of it. When you start to use that thing, people, places, or thing, and it starts to interfere with your normal activities and it starts to take away. Because if I eat too much food, right, and these hips get too heavy, I can no longer go out and move my physical body in the way that I want to. I no longer have the desire to put on my cute clothes so it's having an adverse effect, right? So if Netflix makes you feel good, but if Netflix is keeping you from doing your work, if Netflix is getting in the way of you taking care of your children, taking care of your family, getting yourself up to go, I'm going to say it nice because this is being recorded. So go take a bath. Take care of your basic necessities. If anything, whether it be Netflix, you fill in the blanks for your thing. If it's keeping you from doing your normal daily activities, then you need to check in on that thing. It might be too much. Dr. Moore?
Great point. Great point, Kim. The only thing I would like to add is that there's been some controversy in the field for quite some years now, for about 4 or 5 years, regarding this terminology we use called self-care, because a lot of people think it's self-care. I just need to take care of myself. What makes me feel good? What makes me feel good? Does a drink or two make me feel good? Smoking on a blunt, does that make me feel good? Yes, it may make you feel good. So the concept now is not to try to move away from the self-care. Let's talk about self-wellness. Let's change the terminology to self-wellness. And there's questions you got to ask. Is it good for my body? If it's not good for my body, can you really call it self-wellness? Is it going to make me get better? Can I really call it self-wellness? Yeah, I'll be happy for a moment, but then I got to wake up. Now I got a headache, I'm killing my liver. I'm killing my liver, damage. Are we doing these type of things? So yeah, when we talk about self-care, if you're going in the wrong direction with that terminology, switch it over to self-wellness. And wellness means wellness. It means that you're taking care of the temple.
Ooh, golly, you got me live. Take care of your temple. Listen, and if you're spending your rent money to take care of your drug habit, it's a problem. If you're using your light bill money to take care of your food habit, your drinking habit, it's a problem. And I don't know, COVID should have shut down some of this sexual play out here. I'm just going to leave it at that. But anyway, even though people can't see what you're doing in the dark, doesn't mean that you're just not destroying your temple. And that's why I say this response to self-care that we keep using as a trendy little word, it actually is very personal. So before we go to the next slide, I just want to make sure you look at these things right now because of the coronavirus and all the fears and anxieties that go with all of that. We're working at home. We're teaching at home. I have a high schooler who transitioned from middle school to the virtual hallway of classroom in the high school and all that comes with that. My kids don't feel the same, right? Graduation and the way we educate our children doesn't look the same. There's political divide in our nation, right here in our city. Some days this lady on the bottom is just laying down. She's me. I ain't doing it. Not today. I'm turning off my phone. I'm not listening, right? My stress level is just way too high. Next slide. All right. So I want us to understand that we will never, because of coronavirus, we will probably never return to our carefree, untroubled lives that existed before the COVID-19 pandemic and the racial pandemic. All right. It carries a lot of tragedy. But I want us to understand that together we can heal and we can move forward. And the reason that we're having this conversation is because it's so important that we understand that we do not let our unresolved grief take away the possibility of true joy in our lives, right? Next slide. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times we get so caught up in what's going on that we sometimes miss the joy that's in the present moment. Yesterday, when I took a walk, it was like the board Duncan said, hey, while you're out there walking, why don't you listen to the birds, right? And so the birds kind of helped me to get grounded and centered in where I was. And so some of the things that you can do to reach out, you know, if you see someone or you notice yourself that you're in a little bit of trouble and your grief has become complicated, I always like to remind people to have their personal board of directors, right? And for this, you get to decide who's on your personal board of directors. And sometimes some of your people's term limits has run out and it's time for you to let them know it's over. You got to go. It's not working for me. So I have people in my circle like Dr. Moore and others, and I see you, Jacqueline, who can tell me that, Kimberly, you were acting a little bit out of the ordinary. You might be a little too paranoid right now, and you need to check in with your stuff. Everybody can't be on your personal board of directors because there has to be a level of trust. And these are people who also know my issues and all of my diagnoses. And so they know that even though I may show up on the computer screen looking and all put together, that there is some junk in the trunk in the background, and they're willing to call me out on my stuff. Jacqueline, go ahead.
Yeah, so the person who presented that question found your input and your responses extremely helpful. They said, great idea. It's good for my body. It's good for my spirit. It's good for my mind. I don't know if they said it like that, but that's how I'm feeling it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So guys, you know, with your personal board of directors, if you haven't actually sat down and thought about it, see if there's 5 names that you can write down of people to call if you should find yourself in a mental crisis. Oh yeah, I got some people like Dr. Moore I can call when I need a couple of dollars. But if I can't get up off the floor and I'm in a sobbing, I just can't get out the house today. My anxiety is paralyzing me. Who do you call? So see if you can come up with 5 names, right? And you may change your mind. Also, don't forget to you have friends, you have church, you have your church family. It's a little different now, but you know, the clergy is still available. There are people who are willing to pray for you. And remember to watch who you ask to pray for you and lay hands on you. I'm going to sit still with that. Don't forget there are community and local resources available. We've mentioned throughout this conference that there is a crisis line available, and that number is 512-472-HELP. Again, that's 512-472-HELP. There's also a suicide prevention line, which is 1-800-273-TALK. Okay. Also, when I was a substitute in the high schools, in the classrooms, in the bathrooms, they used to have this sticker on the back of the wall to text hello, HELLO, to 741-741. Now, again, these things might not be helpful for you right now, but it is my prayer that you call on these things when you know of someone or yourself in a situation. Next slide. All right, so we've been talking a lot about this. I think we lost Dr. Moore, but we hope to have him back. This is where I'm going to encourage you all to get involved. We've been talking about it, like okay, good. Taking care of yourself. So let's talk about what grief actually does to your body very quickly. Ooh, we're almost out of time. I love it. You do know that grief is physical. It's not just in your mind. it actually takes a physical toll on your body. It hurts. Okay? I know many of you can resonate with me when I tell you that your heart literally aches. You know, you may have a memory that come up for you and then your stomach hurts, or you may get a chill down your spine. Your heart starts to race. May have so much energy you can't even sleep. There may be times where you fall asleep, but then you still wake up unrested and exhausted. And then sometimes, like me, you still end up spending the whole day in the bed. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, I'm like, this day is shot. So listen, I want you guys to start putting in the chat box and begin to put in your comments, raise your hands. Let's talk about it, right? We've already been talking about some of the things we can do. I have a pre-COVID self-care list. Let me get my paper ready. So I was having pedicures and manicures. I was going to the hair salon to get my hair done. I was getting my eyelashes done. I was taking all these wonderful, extravagant, exotic trips. I was staying in hotels, even in Austin locally, just to get away. I would go to H-E-B and just walk up and down the aisles and talk to strangers like they were my friends. I would go to Goodwill, to the boutique, and just get lost in shopping sprees, right? Binge shopping, right? Family reunions, birthday parties, let me not expose myself, going to them places, just having a little drinky drink, right? Just taking the edge off. But self-care looks a little bit different right now during COVID. Actually, it is a matter of life and death for me. If I don't get intentional about what self-care really means and forget the trendy parts of it, I will die, right? And so right now for me, it's getting in the Word of God, just studying, finding comfort in His words, standing on the Word of God and what the scriptures say for me. I write a lot. Someone mentioned yesterday in another workshop, either let it out with your fingers by writing, which is a really sweet release, or to find someone that you trust and get it off your lips. Again, if you let it out of your body, then maybe it won't become a cancer inside of you. And there's freedom in just sharing with others, right? I actually wrote on my list that I do TV binge. I normally don't watch TV, but watching cartoons for me on the Disney Channel allows me to escape all the craziness that's going on in the world. Now, when I say TV binge, some of us need to detox off of the news. You need to be very careful about what you intake. And then you wonder why you're acting out with your family, why you're yelling. What did you just watch on CNN? Be flexible with yourself and others. Be kind and compassionate to yourself and for others. Be forgiving, right? I've had to change my eating a whole lot. I am what I eat, right? And I want to be green. It's my favorite color. So anyway, I'm going to open it up for others to talk about self-care and taking care of yourself and what that means for you during this time as our time begins to wind up. Any hands raised? Any feedback? And y'all know I'm an introvert living in an extrovert body. So this is something for me. And remember, as I minister to you, I minister to myself. Next slide. Just know that stress links the emotional and stress is the link that brings you to this emotional and physical aspect of grief. And I just want you to acknowledge what happens in your body when you feel grief. Your emotional.
Kimberly.
Yes.
You know what? I wanted to share something that was passed on to me by being in several circles in terms of like being a Black woman and self-care is, and I forget exactly who said it, but whose quote this is, radical self-care and practicing what's radical for yourself, like really deciding what works for me. and what's going to be something that I can manage, that I can get through, that I have the tools, the resources, the power to decide for myself. And a lot of times, oh, honey, that is radical. And then the second thing is something that I've heard, like being in social services for more than 30 years, is that a lot of times we, as we're working with people, we're trying to help solve problems and fix things and help to bring change. But so I'm going to tie this into like television and stuff. I tend to like shows and stuff that, yeah, it's a lot going on. But the good thing about the strategy is I don't have to do anything about it. I can still kind of see all the stuff that is happening and, you know, the crimes and stuff like that. But that's a space I don't have to do a thing about it. I don't have to make a phone call. I don't have to help bring a safety plan for someone. So I thought I would just share those two strategies and things that I tend to practice for myself.
That is awesome. So up here on the screen is contact information for Dr. Moore and I, but because we still have time, if I could unshare the screen at this time, and we'll put that back up right before we get out of here. So again, thank each of you for being here. I just want to acknowledge that there are some things that actually happens in your body. And like half the battle is actually being aware of what's happening. Some of my things is feeling my heart palpitations. These are just some things to note for yourself. What's your level of fatigue? My other sources were saying like your hair is graying and you're becoming thin. Well, I thought these were my wisdom strands. But anyway, note of that. Weight gain and or significant weight loss. Are you experiencing deep insomnia? Are you sitting up scrolling all night because you can't sleep? Check in on that. And this was a big one for me. Grief causing reduced immunity. Oh my goodness. This is why self-care becomes so important, because we know with COVID-19, because that is what we're talking about, that your immunity system is actually going to be your saving grace. So that's why I say when we talk about self-care, it has to be personal and it has to be radical. And Jacqueline, you mentioned using what you have. Listen, use what you have. If you have working legs and you can move your body outside, you can go outside and all you have to do is walk. It doesn't require that you don't have to tell your right leg to move, your left foot to move. You don't have to tell your arms to swing, just move. And so I've heard this a lot of times, walking takes care of your holistic self. Oh my gosh, just try it. I don't go out to walk to lose weight. I go out to walk my anxiety, and I go out to walk my fear. And I end up feeling better and losing weight and just feeling better and having more energy and being able to sleep at night are actually byproducts of just going out to walk. Another thing that may come up for you, you may notice skin irritations. I always tell people what's on the inside of you, if it needs to come out, it's going to find a way. So if you're not speaking it, writing it, or sharing with someone, it may show up as some skin irritations on your face and or around your body. So I'm so glad
Kim,
you're...
I want to just add a great piece to go with what you were just talking about. There's a book out called The Body Keeps a Score, and it's by Dr. Kolk, K-O-L-K. Goes through all of that.
It's awesome. Reading is very important during this time as we're sheltered in place. Again, you know, one of the most important things I tell my clients and myself is to be very mindful of the things that you are intaking. Because we have moved to a very technological world, if that's such a thing, I spend a lot of time in front of the screen. And now I've learned how to master working multiple screens at one time. I'm taking all that stuff in. So give yourself some breaks away from the screen, between sessions. Go out and walk. And even if you can't walk, go out and let the sunshine kiss you. It's something about vitamin D. And in most of my reading and research, I'm finding that a lot of those that have COVID-19 also have a vitamin D deficiency. That's probably all off of it, but something happens when you go outside. So that's like my big takeaway for today. I believe our time is just about up, and I want to honor our time today. If there's no more, go ahead, Jacqueline.
No, I just want to thank you for sharing your experience, your journey, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. So I want to personally thank you for that.
Yes, thank you all for being here. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And the reason that it's so important that I share this topic of grief that doesn't bring all smiles and make me feel giddy is because this is something that I'm actually working on in real time. And I understand that while I'm dealing with grief, there are all these other issues on top of that I must address, and I must be real about it. And so again, I say, as I minister to you, I'm really ministering to myself, right? And the key here is being aware and to make sure that you're not self-sabotaging yourself while you shelter in place, and that you're mindful of the things that you're taking in. Yeah, because, when we're grieving, we also hurt those around us. Like I say, what's on the inside is going to come out in some way. And it doesn't serve me at all to be here on the screen and stand before you with looking all together and then turn off the camera and then yell at my family members who are also here sheltered in place, right? So check in on your grief, right? And when a new grief happens, it tends to also bring up old grief, right? So seek the help that you need. Again, I don't know if we're if this is it, we can put up our contact information. Again, Dr. Ulysses Moore is in private practice. I am a practitioner with the Hope Project, where we serve youth through the Yes Waiver program with Bluebonnet Trails. I'm out in the field, we're doing the work, but it's so important that those professionals who are out there also acknowledge that COVID is changing things for us. And there is some pain and some grief that we need to address if we ever anticipate being champions and helping others with their grief. Again, my name is Kimberly Holiday. I'd like to thank Dr. Ulysses Moore for being here. I'd like to thank Jacqueline for being an amazing moderator, Melanie Diggs in the background, and Ellen as my chat champions, and Justin as my technical support. You guys have propped me up on the right and the left, and I think I'm going to go out and be able to run a whole block.
Thanks, guys. We really appreciate it.
Dr. Moore, go ahead.
I was just giving my little thanks. Thanks for everybody for being here. Hope you learned something. I highly encourage you to check out the book. And I'm thinking this PowerPoint will be available to you as well. Thank you.
I will make this PowerPoint available to you as well. As we close out, I want to let you know that, listen, thank you for being here at this conference. I came to the conference, the food and the entertainment. I walked in the room and I found my healing. I realized that if those people were up on the stage doing it, so could I. And so today is just proof again that if you think you can't do something because you have a diagnosis or because someone lied to you long ago and told you weren't worthy and you weren't good enough, you weren't smart enough, you weren't pretty enough, and you couldn't do it, those are lies. And I encourage you to check in on your limited beliefs and enjoy the rest of the conference. And I'm here just like you. I came for healing today. Thank you all for allowing me to share myself. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference.
And I would like to thank Kimberly and Dr. Moore for sharing their knowledge and insight with us. And many, many, many thanks to all of you who joined us today. We thank you and appreciate your presence. Please take a few minutes to complete the workshop survey. It helps us to know how we're doing. If you're seeking CEUs, remember that your forms will be in the survey. Again, if you're seeking CEUs, remember the forms will be in the survey and the links are in the chat. We are so grateful for you today. Be well and take care of yourself. See you next time.
Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, Jacqueline. You rock.
Thank you. You rock. You rock. We both rock.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day.